right, here we are again, another episode of Combustible Podcast. I'm joined by Pabel, Bill, and Shane, and on the telephone we have retired Captain Todd Edwards, and we're going to just cover some stuff. He's got a pretty dynamic career in training and things like that, and we're going to kind of delve into some of that and find out what he's doing now and how he's enjoying retirement, and find out more about his career. And how many years did you actually serve for, Todd?
I did the full 30, between field ops and a few other short time positions, and then left, and now I work back for the department in the training division.
Okay. And how long have you been doing that?
I've been a year already, so I guess total service to the department itself is 31 now.
Wow, 31 years. That's a good long time.
Yeah. It doesn't seem that long. It really does not seem that long. I was recently speaking to some guys, and when you're immersed in it, you don't realize it, and then you wake up one morning and it's 31 years gone by.
So for the listeners that don't know you, obviously me and you are pretty tight. We've known each other a good long time. Kind of walk them through how you got into the fire service.
So I guess my main reason for getting in the fire service is I grew up in the American Fire Service. My father was, when he retired eventually from his full-time department, he worked for a public safety department, and they would do X amount of hours in a cruiser, carrying their turnout gear in the cruiser, and would just respond directly to fires, and then they'd spend, a certain amount of time in the firehouse as well. So he retired from the city of Oakwood, which is in Ohio, after almost 30 years there, or 20 years there, and then he also was working full-time he was actually my very first fire chief. So my entire life, even as a 7-year-old, we'd be at the firehouse, at the volunteer hall, and that's, every Christmas, Santa arriving on the fire truck, and every Easter, and everything involved around the fire department. And
so you're a lifer.
I'd say life is a good way to put it. So at 16, I was able to join the department, and one of the departments he was fire chief over, and it was a combination department, 3 stations, full-time during the day, and then volunteer at night, weekends, and holidays, all volunteer members. So that's just really, that's all I've ever done. It's all I've ever known is being around firefighters and just what I kind of describe as a lifestyle. It's not a job. It's actually a lifestyle you get involved in with the fire service.
Right. And then you changed departments as well, correct? You didn't stay with that?
Yeah. Well, when I was coming into where I wanted to go someplace, I wanted to always work for a big city. And at that time in 1987, I started just applying everywhere, all over the country. I didn't really have a preference. It wasn't like I had to live in Atlanta or I had to live in, Boston or Chicago, but I applied everywhere. And I stayed local as well. But at that time, it was just a very unique time in the country as well. And nobody would hire. They were all being, I don't want to say forced, but there was a lack of diversity throughout the American Fire Service at that time. So Atlanta was exactly opposite. They were looking for firefighters. I had a friend on Atlanta Police Department. He said Atlanta was desperate and was hiring everybody they could hire at that moment, and ended up coming down here. And it was, turned out to be the best decision of my life to join that organization and raised my kids in this organization in a lot of ways. Got married while I was on the job. I mean, there was nothing that Atlanta Fire and my years there haven't been involved as part of my daily life.
Awesome.
So yeah, worked out great. Really worked out great.
So in the department, the full-time department you worked for, what kind of ranks did you go through, or what was your career path?
I started as a firefighter. Very busy house when I came out of first school. Never made blanket driver. Not the greatest driver in the world. And so I moved up all my career path timed out perfect. So right 5-year mark, I made lieutenant. 2 years later, made captain, went back to lieutenant for a little bit, just because of the way things panned out. And then captain, was served as battalion chief for close to 6 years, and moved up one more time after that, and ended up retiring after some things back as a captain. So I left my job as a captain, and actually, again, I tell guys everything in your career in the fire service, there's a purpose and a reason for all those things. So everything worked out great. I have no ill will about everything, and truly enjoyed my last almost 3.5 years as a captain, working on a busy engine company, and wouldn't trade it for anything. My entire career path, I wouldn't change.
So what would you attribute that positive outlook in as far as not having any ill will? A lot of people would be very disgruntled that they had gone up to the assistant chief level and then moved back down to captain, but you're saying you left and no harm, no foul.
Yeah, and I'm not, I'd be lying if I didn't say when I was initially demoted back to captain rank, that I wasn't a little disgruntled, wasn't a little mad. Took me a little bit to get engaged, kind of re-engaged, but at the end of the day, it's not from a leadership standpoint. Again, I'm just throwing this is my opinion. If you're thinking about yourself, then you shouldn't be a leader in any way, shape, form, or manner, because that's not what you're being a boss about or being a leader about. And at the end of the day, I had too much. I love the job too much. I love going to the fires. I love the fire service, and I love the guys, and I wanted to always work for them. And I never considered it any other way. What we do is a lot more important than a few crossed over bugles on your collar, and that should never define you. If that is what's defining you, then you should take a step back and look in the mirror and really determine if you should be in charge of other people's lives. If that's what your only focus is on how many bugles you can have on your collar. So that's why I went back, and again, that's why I'm still engaged with the fire service today. Because of those reasons. It's not about us. It's about that 21-year-old kid sitting in a firehouse right now that's going to be somebody else's boss one day.
Yeah, I should probably warn the listeners right now that you have a very direct style that makes mine pale in comparison. Actually, I probably learned it from you, so if you're not used to that, you should buckle up and maybe get ready for a bumpy ride. This is going to be fun. Yeah, Todd's known for being quite direct, so this is if some people get their feelings hurt, they're going to have a hard time here.
Yeah, and that's what usually gets me in trouble when somebody gets their little feelings crushed a little bit. But and I'm sure everybody, the truth. The guys who are listening know those are the guys who listen to podcasts. Are those guys? Those are the guys that want to make if you look just at your own organization, you're missing the boat as well. You got to get outside the four walls, get out of you guys were kind of joking around about being comfortable. You've got to be out of that comfort zone every now and then. But whatever you think your department's doing better than everybody else, go look around, because somebody else is doing it better than you are. And that's how I've always approached it. I cannot overstate how important that is to get outside the four walls of your organization and see what other departments are doing that's working, and in some cases not working. But as far as me being just an honest and direct one, you need to look yourself in the mirror there, Hatch.
I said I learned it from you. I think
he was a good student.
Yeah. I think you're the second retired from the fire service person we've had, Marty being the first.
Yeah.
And that brings a whole new plethora of questions. And one that I always have for everybody who's retired is, what was that transition like, or that year leading up to you hitting that 30-year mark? What kind of planning did you do? What kind of, I identify as a firefighter. Hell, you've been in it since you could walk or really have, collective memories from it. What was your thoughts about what you're going to do for retirement?
In all reality, I didn't want to. I just to be honest, I didn't really want to leave. I so enjoyed going to the firehouse every third day. But at the end, I had other opportunities to train and work with other departments, and get the opportunity to work at throughout the country in a lot of ways. So that was to end up being my driving force as far as plan. And I've always done training. I've always been lucky and blessed enough to go teach at other places, and the opportunities were just too many to pass that up. And and financially, it made better sense to retire at that point as well. It wasn't about money at all, but I have to still look over, and everybody does. You have to still look what's going to be best for your wife and your children and those type of things as well. It's a lot we ask of our families to put up with us for that length of time, being gone, and add on top of working part-time somewhere, and then add on top of that going to classes. It's a lot to ask of our families. And it was, again, that was another factor, and it was something that we had talked about and we spent time getting ready for as far as setting up for retirement. And it was, and I guess I'm not technically retired per se. I'm retired off the line, but I get so many great opportunities to be around firefighters and doing lots of live fire training. And, I don't feel like I've ever left in all reality. And that's helped me transition. I couldn't have just walked out the last day and turned it off.
Couldn't go
cold
turkey.
Not my nature.
No, I think that's the best one. Like you said, he's been in it for so long. And when you asked him what's, leading up to retirement or how retirement is, you really didn't retire. You're still doing this thing. You're still involved in this service. Yeah. So I think it's great.
And I don't know when. I don't know. I've never thought about not doing something, as far as this line of work, whether it's, teaching, writing, which I'm horrible at, so I don't write. I have no articles out there because I'm, the worst writer of all time. So the teaching aspect, as long as, departments and folks will have me, I'll keep doing that. It keeps me engaged. And that's my favorite part, being around, like-minded people like you guys. And, just got back from Pensacola Beach teaching for a couple of days. Those are the things that keep you engaged in the American Fire Service. And like I said, starting off, this is a lifestyle. That the true great guys of this job, it's a lifestyle. It's not a 24 and go and never read anything or study or take a class. Those guys are I hate those guys.
So Todd, this is Bill. I don't think we've met, and if we have, I apologize for not remembering. But I've always heard your name as far back as I can remember being a firefighter, and your name has always been, for me, kind of coupled with the idea of you as an instructor. And I would assume that it sounds like you've been very training focused throughout your career, and now you are as well in retirement. What would you attribute that to? Were you a good student in school, or did this interest in training, was this a product of firefighting?
It was truly a product of firefighting. I was very lucky at the time, coming up through high school. I knew college was not my career track. I knew at 5 years old I wanted to be a fireman, so that kind of is where my focus was. But we had a place called the Dayton Career Academy, and it was really a high school program or high school design for kids looking to do other things other than college. And they actually had a fire service program that I attended for 3 years. And you would do, your standard, high school courses, but for 4 to 6 hours out of every day, you were doing fire stuff. You were studying the book, and you were going to the Dayton Fire Department drill yard. And we had 2 retired captains from the Dayton Fire Department. We got to do ride-alongs. So the more I was around those guys, the more I was studying fire, and the more instructors I was around. I just thought, man, that is so cool to see this. Charles Newcomb was our lead instructor, and if you looked up the word salty, that would be this guy. And you're sitting there as a 16-year-old kid, and this guy is just berating us around the drill yard, carrying a wooden 40-foot ladder, 5 of us, and just, you're bouncing, do it again. And he was that guy. And I always have looked at those things as part of our job. I think every firefighter, especially our senior guys, you guys included, we should be teaching. I think you guys are doing that with your podcast. You're actually teaching people.
Well, we appreciate that. It might be debatable.
Yeah. Anything good actually comes out of that. Yeah.
But we appreciate it.
It's another form of teaching. I mean, what a great way to spend your drive to work is listening, to different podcasts that are out there. There's some I don't listen to, but, I'll plug you guys in, James Gearing, and a few others that, I absolutely love listening to, because I never know what you guys are going to say next. So.
Right. Neither do we.
And that's why it always works. I had great officers that were great instructors. And I always thought, man, that's what we should be doing. We should be past that. How's a 20-year-old kid in a smaller organization go and learn? He's not going to 4 or 5 jobs a day, so he's got to learn from something or from somebody else's experience. And not knocking the Firefighter 1 books, but that's not a lot of information when you pull up at a 2-story wood frame at 3 a.m.
Yeah. So, has there been an area of training that you've kind of concentrated in over your time?
I tell you, I guess what I'm doing instructor development programs, my focus is to get guys to understand if you don't know it, you should never teach it. So I stay away from more things than probably a lot of instructors do. But I've, a lot of strong focus on strategy and tactics, strong focus on leadership, strong focus on engine work. For the most part, I'm not a truck guy. I've been on trucks. I've been a captain on a ladder truck. Killer ladder truck, but literally if there's a saw in the room that's not running, there's still a shot that I may cut my leg off. So I try, I just don't, I can search. I consider, I teach a lot of classes on search and rescue, but as long as we don't have to crank any tools, I should be safe.
I would never have thought that.
Not the best tool guy. Halligan bar, hook, I'm good with, but as soon as we put fuel and sharp items, there's no risk of injury for sure.
Well, with your
I've always focused on those things that I feel like I was strong in, and that I'm still learning. I'm always amazed when I go to conferences what I walk away with from what I learn at these classes and different things I attend.
So, with that concentration on strategy and tactics, what makes you happy on scene?
Oh, properly placed apparatus for when I would first arrive. It drove me nuts. The parade mode where you've got 9 trucks and they're all lined up like they're getting ready for Veterans Day parade. Properly placed hose lines, and the very few things made me mad at fire, except when I saw a guy with kinks in hose lines, which to me is just there's no excuse to have a kink in a hose line. Even with one guy stretching, if you know how to stretch hose, there should never be a kink in a hose line. So, you're reducing so much of your pressure that you kind of need that inside the house, not out in the yard. Not laddering buildings drives me insane. If I got a 2-story house, why is there one ladder up? And there's 4 sides to a house, multiple windows. We should have more than one ladder up. So it's little things. It was little things. There's never big things. There's just little things. But and I'm sure all of you have read line of duty death reports and IOS and near misses. It's never one thing.
Nope.
It's always a stack of little things. Yeah. And, it always starts with that first line getting in operation first and foremost. And after that, if we got line stretched and we got good, strong searches going on, the only other thing that I would say from a leadership standpoint, when truck companies are assigned primary search and they all end up in the fire room pulling ceiling, but there should be searching. And, you can always tell when a guy's pulling ceiling versus in the primary search.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's pretty audible.
Yeah.
Todd, this is Shane. I got a question for you on your what you like and what you don't. When you had that fireground where it didn't go quite the way you thought it was going to go, or the trucks didn't end up exactly where you thought they should be, is the moment to teach, was it that very direct bam, or was there a time where you spent to say, here's why these things should be some other way?
Yeah, it obviously after the incident, unless it had to be fixed for the incident, but it was always after the incident. As a company officer, my first order of business was always with my crew, and we always worked under, and it just may seem odd to some, my first question, I always want to know what I did. I always ask the guys if they knew what I was doing, I want to know how I did, but I didn't want to hear from a chief. I wanted to hear from the 3 members directly underneath me first. and that build a rapport. They start learning how I'm thinking, and at the same time, I'm learning how they're thinking. And we would go through where we stopped at, where we parked, how we pulled hose, where the line gets stretched. Always, 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 first and foremost with my company. As a battalion chief, if no matter what, we would always get together. I was not a fan of doing after action reviews 5 shifts later.
Right.
You know, let's learn why we're here, where you can see the big picture. And we're in a content fire where we have one line and, a little 1-story job, not as big a deal, but anything, apartments, buildings with a, pretty big offset off the street, we would just get together as a company and talk about it, as everybody on the scene, at least the officers, and we would direct it then. And I never looked at them as, you guys suck or anything like that, but I've never been, and I know Hatch would probably back me on this, and I'm sure you guys too. I've never been to a perfect fire.
Yeah.
There's always something we can learn from. Yeah, whether it's a hose line, a ladder, a search, the way we pulled seal, the way we operate the nozzles, whatever the case is, we should always learn something from every fire we go to. It doesn't always have to be the big glorious job. Even a mattress fire, we can usually pick up something. Hey, next time let's try pulling the lock this way. Or next time let's take the back door versus the front door. Any little thing we pick up on that's going to apply to us at the next job or the job we're going to have in 3 months, whatever the case may be.
So for those after actions, a common theme I see a lot of times is the firefighters think that we're fussing at them or that we're criticizing or coming down on them. What would be your suggestion for kind of keeping that positive, keeping it more towards the learning and not so much the criticizing?
I think, again, going back to that very first step, I wanted to hear from the guys. Did you understand, even at a command position, did you understand why I wanted you here? Did you understand why we pulled you from the building? And allow them to critique, I know we don't use the word critique, but to tell me what their thoughts were coming from me as the boss. Because again, I've got to learn too, because you can always learn something from every fire you go to. But then afterward, we always focused on 3 positives. And every fire I can always find, 1, 2, 3, or even more positives than negatives. So we always did 3 things we did really, really good, 3 things that we could have improved on. And, most time we didn't have them, but if we sucked at something, that particular job, we talked about it. Not criticized, we actually talked about and figured out why it sucked, why we didn't do this very well.
So how were those 3 things in each of those categories determined? Was that you, or was it the seatmen on scene got together?
No, it was all of us.
Okay.
I was a huge believer in all of us.
Okay.
Because if the 4 of us are all standing in front of a house, all 4 of us are going to see 1 or 2 little things differently. And sometimes from your expert, sometimes from your experience, obviously. But I was more aligned of looking at it from, if we got some positives, but we can always make improvements. And again, we're not going to be perfect at this job, but we can be experts at this job at the same time.
Right.
Why we're making mistakes.
So,
and it was always in that light.
Those people and I think we've all come up against them. There aren't that many around, but there are people that are resistant to hearing that they've done anything wrong or that there was any way that, it could be improved. What do you do with those people?
So one of the things and I know not every boss agrees with this concept. I'm a big believer in getting guys to ask why, as well as myself as a leader, is asking them why. Well, why don't you think we did this? And it's funny how when you ask somebody, I was recently doing a program at another department, and one of the captains was mad about having a rope taken off his rig. I said, well, did you ask why? And he just stared at me. I said, did you ask why they took the rope? And he said, no, I didn't ask. I said, well, who should you ask? My battalion chief. And his battalion chief was in the room. So I looked over at the battalion chief. I said, why did you take the rope off the rig? And the battalion chief didn't know. So it's funny how when you start asking questions, so when you have that guy that doesn't believe we should ladder that window, why don't you think that?
Right.
Make them, and it's funny when you get guys actually look at it from a different perspective, instead of just, you got to put the ladder here. Ask them why they didn't put the ladder there. And then that sometimes leads to identifying other training issues, but also gives them an opportunity to kind of reflect the way you're thinking and the way they're thinking. And this becomes more of an understanding thing to me than anything else. So I love that. I know some guys, don't ask me why. Don't ask me when the damn thing's burning like hell. But afterwards, we're going to ask those whys. Why we did this, why we didn't do this. And that, it's again, will you still have that guy that's going to push back? Sure. And those are the guys that I never had a problem with, because I wanted to show them why we pulled the window sill, or why we forced the door this direction. And once you start explaining your whys, sometimes that fills a lot of gaps and makes them ask the same questions over and over as well. It's not complicated. We just like to overcomplicate crap.
That's true. That is absolutely true.
That should be on the back of our T-shirts. We like to overcomplicate
crap. What position in your career was the most fun?
The most fun?
Fun, yeah.
Captain was the most fun. No doubt about Captain was the most fun. Having those daily interactions with your crew, watching a kid come into your station and watching him go from scared to death to gaining some confidence, learning the job, becoming a driver. And some of the best things ever was seeing guys that you had as a lieutenant and as a captain who are now lieutenants and captains and, and battalion chiefs, and seeing those guys grow. That to me was fun. And it's, sitting around the station, when you're done for the day was fun. So I've rarely had any bad shifts, as a boss or as a firefighter, but captain to me was still a great position because you had influence, but you still got to be inside doing the job at the same time. So, it's kind of the best of both worlds, for me.
Yeah, I could see that being rewarding. Would you say that's also your most rewarding position?
I think in all reality, as a battalion chief was my most rewarding, because sometimes you have to get to that next level in the chain of command to actually have some true hardcore influence on more than just 3 or 4 firefighters. As a BC, I was able to influence, at my time, I had 6 captains, 2 lieutenants every shift, and, a whole host of firefighters, between 6 companies. And I was engaged with every company. I didn't do just captain meetings. I'm really speaking to the captains. I thought that was one of the biggest BS things I've ever seen an battalion chief do. So I went and we did company training, and I was the lead instructor on those drills, helping firefighters develop and sharing stuff with them. So reward-wise, not just at the battalion level, but you also had that opportunity to maybe influence other officers throughout your department, working on committees. I know guys always frown on committees, but, I've worked with operations committee, and I know Hatch, you came in and revamped a lot of it, made it better, but it was rewarding to see this department move forward under things you got to actually work on that you don't always get to do as a line officer. So being a battalion chief, you got to do some of those other things. And so both those positions have reward fun-wise. There were some fun times as a battalion chief, and there were some very beat your head against the wall times as well.
Well, and I think that's something that kind of is missed on younger firefighters sometimes, is the difference between fun and rewarding, and that sometimes they coexist and sometimes they're not the same. Like you said, it's more rewarding than it is fun.
I agree with you. I think it's after you step away or you take a step back, and I always try to get guys to reflect back on things that, you're just making a difference at a call can be rewarding and fun at the same time.
Right.
And sometimes it's your perspectives on things that make a difference.
So this is a little bit one of those kind of crazy theoretical questions, but if you had only 1 hour to teach, but you could teach all of the firefighters in the world at once, what would you teach for that hour?
Realistic leadership.
And how do you define that?
I never knock the programs that are out there because they all serve a purpose, but they're very canned, very clinical, very book driven type of programs. And that, we were kind of laughing, but if you Google leadership, you get 4 billion hits. So if you want to talk about overcomplicate something, how we've overcomplicated leadership to a certain point. And, I know it sounds very simple in a lot of ways, but if we would start teaching, our firefighters to be leaders day one, imagine what they'd be like 10 years, 15 years, 20 years down the road.
Right.
And we wouldn't have this cycle that you hear guys, I work for this guy and he's this, and this guy sucks at this, and this guy doesn't do this. And why don't we start teaching that now? So for an hour, I want to teach some leadership stuff and tactics and tips that actually work. And I do a program on that. This is what I know works. I'm not saying I know everything, and I guarantee all of us would have different opinions about what you guys think and believe, but wow, how simple can you make leadership if you just, have a simple conversation sometimes instead of lighting somebody up because they, had a smudge mark on their boot that day. It's insanity what we do to our firefighters and our other leaders, what we worry about when it really should have been a simple one-on-one conversation, or maybe just a one-on-one, chew that ass for a few seconds and move on with our days and just then let it go. But we have too much of that in the American Fire Service today. Leaders leading by books and policies and not leading, by being a human being first. So it'd be leadership for sure. Unless they want to say something. If I can do both, and I've combined a leadership class with live fire at the same time. So it'd be, if I could do maybe 30 minutes in the classroom and 30 minutes in the burn bill, it'd be perfect.
All things are better if it's on fire, right?
Everything's better when it's on fire.
Hey, Todd, this is Pabel. I apologize being quiet in the background, but, I'm listening to a lot of this, and I'm very much involved when training myself and very passionate about it, so I'm kind of soaking all this stuff in. And when you hit that trigger on the leadership, which I agree, immediately what goes into my mind is the fact that, statistics say that there's a lot of when they do the research and they ask people, do you feel that you're a leader? A lot of people believe they're leaders, but there's nobody to tell them, well, maybe you're not that great of a leader. And you brought up something which I think is great. We should be starting right from the get-go to start getting these guys and giving them some of those leadership traits and nuggets and all that kind of stuff. And since you have so much experience traveling around, seeing what's out there around the country, for those of us least experienced, looking into your knowledge, you go, how do we frame that up? We're starting at recruit class. How do we start framing that up to go, let's start creating some good leaders, independent thinking even. We want to do independent thinkers, but then there's a big micromanagement push within the fire service. So some of the obstacles within the same leadership we're adding to ourselves. So I'm just curious, how do I frame that up? I'm gonna establish, within my recruit classes or whatever training programs, I want to start really getting these guys and gals ready for leadership roles. How would you frame that up for us?
I think the first step is, as leaders ourselves, embrace mistakes. So even after they learn the minimum, and I hate that terminology, by the way, minimum standards, ruining the American Fire Service. But once they learn the basics and they're starting to get the basics down, put them in drills and evolutions where they're making decisions, even in recruit school sometimes. Search and rescue is a great way, in my opinion, to do it. Right hand, left hand search pattern looks really good in a book because, they draw little arrows around the room, and all of us know that that's not how it really works. But give them decision-making opportunities in recruit school. They encounter a down firefighter and a civilian. Let them decide how they want to make that rescue instead of the standard, well, we're going to do a left-hand drag, reverse patterns, and right-hand drag out, all this mess. Put them in charge in recruit school even. I do a thing on what I refer to as more of a team leadership. Most of my decisions only happened at fires in my company. When we did special projects, I didn't make decisions about when, where, how many. The guys made those decisions. And I didn't direct housework. They know we got to clean the house. Why do I need to oversee adults about, who's cleaning what? Figure it out. Let them figure it out. Let them have input on what we're going to do that day. And they were fantastic about it. And the more opportunities they were given, the better they became at making those decisions. And what was funny, they made great decisions about a lot of things. And so by starting at that young age, I encourage our young guys to go to leadership classes. I encourage our young guys to do those things, because that's how you start learning your style. And you guys know this, and I don't know if we teach it enough, and I try to bring it to a lot of my classes. We are all going to teach based off of our own personalities at the same time. We're all going to lead off our personalities. No matter how many times we say we're not going to do that, we're still always going to revert back to our personality. And that's something, that's very hard to look at. I believe that enthusiasm is the greatest teacher and the greatest leadership trait that a guy can bring to the table. And I know it sounds a little odd. I'm not talking about rah-rah. Not everything is rainbows and unicorns. But if you're enthusiastic about training, if you're enthusiastic about leadership, if you're enthusiastic about watching that 21-year-old kid advance up to the rank of lieutenant, you're developing great leaders that way, because he's going to be enthusiastic. He's going to be into the job. And that is, to me, so simple, but seems to be so almost pushed against. You have to follow the books and all that, and that's great. But does the book work? Could you be a good leader if you guys, if you had just done your fire officer 1 and 2, would you guys be great leaders?
No. And I'll tell you, you hit a lot of points.
I don't have either one.
You're a great leader then.
You hit a lot of fantastic points in there, and something that captures, and I can literally get lost in conversation while sitting back a little bit when it comes to this training stuff and digging into your brain. I think the reason, and this is just my perception, I think the reason a lot of times they fall into the books is because some people don't have the ability to project outside of themselves and put something together and elaborate on it the way you just did. Something as simple as saying, hey, let's put them into the situation where we're forcing them to make decisions instead of us making decisions for them. It would seem like that's an innate mindset that any trainer would have, but that's not the case. So they're going to rely to the books because they don't have that. And as far as the last thing that you just touched on, being enthusiastic, man, I couldn't agree more. One of the things that we recently did is we put a survey out for the training division, and the question that was asked in there is to rate the trainings division passion, right? And it's subjective, right? So you can have it's a very subjective question. But if you're passionate about what you do, you're going to captivate people. People are going to come in. People are going to buy in. And what I see, and you kind of touched on that, a lot of this stuff is forced, is so robotic, and is so book-like that if you are not putting your personality into it, if you're not being passionate, if you're not sold on it, you've lost your ability to really connect with people and get them sold on it. And from my experiences, that's what I've seen happen is a lot of people are very robotic. Here's what the book says. Here's what I'm going to teach, and not knocking on the book, but where's your personality? Where's your experience? Where's your enthusiasm? And when that's lost, you got a sleeper class. All right, we're just going to get through this so we can be done.
Definitely. But that carries outside the classroom too. If you have the boss, I have a list of what I can, bosses I've been around. I've been around some incredible, guys who are engaged, guys who are enthusiastic, guys who love the job, are great bosses 9 times out of 10. And you got the sleeper, and you got the skater, and you got the Bugles Lives Matters guys, and and sometimes if you get immersed in with those people, you end up, your leadership style's getting developed, and you don't even realize what's going on. That's you heard me say earlier, get outside your 4 walls, man. Get around some of these guys. And I mentioned that I was down with County Fire Tactics at Pensacola this whole past week, and I was rooming with guys with lots more fires than me, and these guys are into the job still today. One of them has over 35 years, and another one is at 30 years, and all we talked about was the job. and jobs they just been to and jobs they can't wait to go to again. And, these guys are going to, 2 and 3 jobs a day, and they're into it. And you can see it when they teach. You can see how captivating they are. And it's not just based on, war stories. They generally want to teach what they've learned. And it carries in their leadership style. They carry themselves as leaders, and you never would once hear them say, I am lieutenant this, or I am captain this. And those are your best leaders. When you got to announce you're a captain, or you got to announce you're a chief and show people your bugles, well, you're probably an idiot.
There it goes.
This is going to be a little bit of a loaded question, but I just got to ask it before I forget it. So you having your experience and being surrounded by all these people, stepping outside of the box, which you alluded to earlier, and I agree with you 100%. You got to step outside of the box. It's going to teach you what you are doing right and what you're not doing right when you get out there and see how other people are doing things. The passion part, when you're getting around these people that are still into the job 20, 30, 40 years later, absolutely love it. You grew up in the fire service. This was your life. You made a lifestyle out of it. The people who are disconnected, can we teach that? Can we train that? Can we foster that? What, from your experiences, what about those? Because the ones that are on fire for the fire service, that's what they're going to be. And they get the speed bump in the road, and it doesn't take it too long before they overcome that, because this is their life. This is their everyday life. So what about those that are sitting out there that you got to come, the ones that go to your training because they were forced to go, not at will to go? Man, I want to expand my knowledge. What about those people? Is there something that we could be doing to impact them to?
Yeah, I think there, I think one mistake we make is we have that guy who is, 6, 7 years, whatever he's been on the job for. And he is, I hate this, I don't like this, that's where, that's why I love asking why. Because when you start asking that again, they don't really know why they're mad, or they're not engaged, or they're not into it, or whatever. I always thought I would love to have had been the captain of a station where if you had a slug, send them to me. Send me your worst. Send me your slug. Send me this most disgruntled guy. If you're around positivity, you get positive. If you're around guys who are enthusiastic, you become enthusiastic. I firmly believe this, but we'll take that guy and we label him because, we don't really get a chance to know him. We don't take the time sometimes to get to know an individual. And you take that disgruntled guy, that guy just not into it, and start let me get to know you personally first. Then I can start figuring out what buttons to help push with you. And then just surround that person all the time with upbeat positivity about the job and what we really do. I think we just push those guys to the side. We put guys that need help into bad situations or with bad bosses, and other bosses, guys higher in the food chain, they need to learn how to recognize when they have poor leadership in their stations, and they need to address that. I had captains that were a little weak when I first came up into the BC rank, and by a constant religious message, everyday communication with those guys, those companies changed. They changed for the better just based on having somebody positive and supportive versus, oh God, we're going to get rode up. Oh God, I was 5 seconds late. Oh God, I'm going to get a letter. Oh, I'm going to get reprimanded. And I think that snowballs, we're talking about how we have stack effect on line of duty death. You have stack effect on bad firemen and bad leadership too. If you're immersed in nothing but guys sitting around, griping and moaning, you're going to become the next guy who's going to sit around and gripe and mope. And then you're going to be that guy who gets lucky and gets, promotes up. And you're going to be that boss now, griping and moping. That's how we create that vicious circle that some departments find themselves in, or battalions, or, whatever the case may be. But, man, let's put that guy with somebody who's going to, take the time. I had a firefighter temporarily assigned. Took this firefighter almost a minute 30 to go mask, hood, helmet, gloves, air. A minute 30.
So we're going to pause this episode right there. We're only about halfway through our discussion with Todd Edwards, and we're pretty sure that by now you're identifying with him when he talks about being around firefighters who really aren't engaged. As Frank Martinez would say, they're not slanted. So what do you do with that firefighter? An even better question is, what would Todd Edwards do with that firefighter? How would he flip that firefighter? Tune in to our next episode for part 2 of our interview with Todd Edwards for the answer to those questions and many more.